Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled Absolutely Unbendable Travel Rules? Fine by me. I worked for a company that was bought out by a large multinational corporation. After a couple of years, a new online expenses system was put in place. This also was used to book travel, hotels. And we were told that under no circumstances could it be circumvented. The travel section was strange. The way it worked was you chose the city you were traveling to, and it gave you the pre-approved hotel you had to choose. All very straightforward, until you consider how these hotels got on there. It wasn't through hundreds of corporate negotiations. It was when the first traveler using the system had to stay in that city found a hotel that met their needs, that became the default hotel. I live in a small country and the local company was based about 150 kilometers from the capital. The only people who'd used the system to stay in my country were the senior VPs who'd worked on the takeover. And when they returned to the capital to fly home, usually spent a few vacation days there. I was asked to go on a training course run by a company in the capital, and being a lowly prole would have expected a Travelodge or similar. But the only choice available to me was the 5-star Intercontinental Hotel, where breakfast starts at €50 and the rooms are eye-watering. I checked with the scheme admin, and she laughed as she read me the rules. Under no circumstances could the system be circumvented. The course was over 2 weeks, and at month-end my expenses were submitted. Nearly $6,000 in hotel bills, plus food and mileage. My boss, in a different country, was almost in tears when he called me about this. Because he knew this compliance to the rules meant he'd have to explain this to his boss. Oddly enough, some other hotels were added soon after. The next story is titled Mandatory Drug Test. Back in 2012, I worked as a medic for the largest medic service in Louisiana as a remote paramedic on a drilling rig. I live in Panama City Beach, FL. I was hired on in 2007 and was chosen at random several times a year for a drug test. Every time I was chosen I was either at work or on training, so it was not a big deal. Enter 2012, I had just returned home on the Thursday before Memorial Day from a 2-week stint on the rig in the Gulf of Mexico. I got a phone call around 4 p.m. on Friday saying I had 24 hours to complete a drug test. I was by the pool and a 6-pack in when I got the call. I asked where I needed to go to pee in a cup. My options were Jacksonville, Atlanta, or New Orleans. There were no other authorized places to accept my exceptional urine. And I had 24 hours. I called up a few friends and they decided New Orleans would be the best spot to spend Memorial Day. To follow all the compliance, we left PCB, drove to NOLA, partied all night, booked the only hotel we could find, ate at really expensive restaurants, peed in a cup, then went back to the French QTR. Stayed one more night and drove home on Sunday. I turned in my expense report as follows: 400 miles travel expense one way. $220 one meal in NOLA for Friday night. $50 $50 was the most we were allowed per meal. One night in the French QTR. $299 breakfast, lunch and dinner. $150 one night in French QTR. $349 breakfast. $50 400 miles home. $220 lunch. 16 hours billed as overtime at 40 per hour. $640 total billed. $1,948. My supervisor probably shut himself, but I got paid, and now there are more authorized places to piss in a cup. And until my departure from them in 2014, I never was selected again for a random test. The next story is titled Delete Everything? Okay. At the start of secondary school, each student at my school was given a unique computer login, where we can access communal resources and save our own private work. A few of my files seem to keep disappearing and new things were put there that I didn't create. After a few days I figure out I'm actually sharing my account with another student, hence the mysterious missing files and random new ones. We meet up and learn we have the same surname, first initial and tutor group. So we assume that's why our accounts are actually the same one. We go down to the IT teacher, we've just started here so figure this is a good place to start. He insists it is impossible for us to have the same account and that we should go in and delete everything that isn't our own work. We explained the situation, even offering to demonstrate how if one of us makes a new document it will appear in the other's account. This was fruitless, so we are instructed to sit down and delete everything that isn't ours. We do so, log off, log on again, and we both have completely blank accounts, having just deleted everything between us. No backup for students' private work. We've lost all assignments and homework. The teacher leaves us, presumably to figure out what's happening, comes back 15 minutes later with an apology and a note excusing us from all homework already set and for not having our classwork. The next week we each receive new accounts, and a month later the IT systems are out for a few days, possibly unrelated, but we like to think they were improving the system to stop this happening again. As a bonus, the notes were undated and signed by the head teacher, so I used it a few times in emergencies over the years. The next story is titled, "Wear a Uniform to School on a Weekend with Half an Hour's Notice?" Sure thing. When I was in high school, we had school uniforms, common in my country. One day we got a message saying that we had to hurry to school to collect a hall ticket for our examination. This was very sudden and I didn't have any uniforms washed, so I put on some decent casual clothes and went to school. Many others had the same idea. When we went to meet the teacher, she got angry at us for not being in uniform, and accused the bunch of us of spending the night together doing God knows what because we all happened to be in casual clothes. It was a very bizarre accusation and frustrating because we simply did not have uniforms ready. But she refused to give us the hall ticket till we were in uniform. Going back home would have been too tedious, so we went to a friend who was in uniform. I'm a trans girl, but my school was very conservative, so I'd been wearing male uniforms for the most part. My male friends all took turns in another male friend's uniform, and I asked a female friend of mine if I could borrow her uniform. So, there I was, in the teacher's eyes, in drag, ready to get my hall ticket, while my male friends would take turns in that single, often obscenely ill-fitting uniform. She got super angry at all of us, but another teacher convinced her to just give the hall tickets, although I was also made to change into that male uniform ultimately. That teacher refuses to talk to us even now, years after graduating. The next story is titled 2P or Not 2P. Back in 2011 I was working for a local council, and as part of the job we were given an off-site training course. Naturally, this was code for visit a city, get drunk every night and attend the course. Most of these courses had no exam at the end, just a certificate for attending the course. They put us up at a hotel in the city centre, on bed and breakfast rates. The expenses policy stated that we were to get a maximum of £10 for lunch and a maximum of £11.73 for evening meal. No one outside the policy makers know why it was such a strange amount. Supervisors could approve expenses above these values should there be where the maximum is too low. It specifically mentioned a remote hotel with expensive menu, but also mentioned that it was at the discretion of the supervisor. The hotel they booked for me had a restaurant, and the cheapest thing on the menu was £11.75, 2p more than I was entitled to. I swiped a menu to prove the point. The first day back after the course, and I asked my boss to authorize the extra expense. He looked at it and said no. I explained that not only did it run to 10p for the week, 2p per day, 5 days, but the cheapest thing on the menu was more than the policy allowed. I even showed him the menu. His response was, stick to what the policy document says you are entitled to. Malicious compliance time. I read the policy document to ensure that I had the details right, and found a link to another document entitled Business Overnight and Out-of-Pocket Expenses. This document was additional to the training expenses document, and Section 1 of this document stated that it can be used in conjunction with the training expenses policy. I sat down and worked out what I was owed. In addition to the standard meal allowances of £21.73 daily, there was also an extra £28 daily I was entitled to. Also, because I had to travel on a Sunday, I was entitled to the travel time as overtime, double pay for a Sunday. As the return train arrived back home after 8 p.m. on the Friday, more than 3 hours past my standard finish time, the Friday was also classed as an overnight. In all, I paid out nearly £110 for meals during the week, but because of my supervisor's reluctance to pay an additional 10p, I claimed for around the £300 mark with 7 hours of overtime pay for an extra £182. After explaining it to the head of IT, who wondered why my expenses were so high, he grudgingly signed it off. The next story is titled More Hotel Expenses Compliance Since We're Doing Stupid Hotel Policies. At Global Corp, the rule was that you could book your own hotel up to a smallish limit, or if you booked through their central booking service it was automatically approved even if it went over. For an emergency trip I had to book a hotel in a very popular area at very short notice just before a holiday weekend. I tried my usual suspects and no luck, so I rang the central booking service. They went away for much longer than usual, then came back to tell me the only place they could find at all was a few miles away, and was the honeymoon suite in a converted 400-year-old manor house with a jacuzzi in the room. It cost well over 5 times the usual limit. I took it. Pity I was barely at the hotel all weekend, but when I was it really helped me relax. Apparently I set a record. The next story is titled Travel to Customer Sites. I was working for an MSP that had customer sites close to my home. I would arrange to be on site at about 9:30. This meant that I would get a lie-in and leave my house at about 9 o'clock to get to the customer site. I would then claim on expenses the travel from the customer back to the office. This worked fine until we got a new manager who stated that we had to start work at the time in our contract and we could only claim mileage to and from the office. The contract stated that our start time was 8:30 and I stated that it would be a waste of my time driving to the office, turning round and driving to a customer's site. He was having none of this. So, I would arrange with the customer that I would be on site at 9:30 and I then proceeded to clock in at 8:25, get to my desk, sit down and have a cup of coffee and read my emails. I then drove to the customer's site, did the work and drove back. After claiming for double the amount of travel expenses, questions were asked, but I pointed to the email that had been sent out. This lasted until the manager changed, who saw sense and changed the system back to how it was. The next story is titled Not Allowed to Leave Until You Say So? Sure. A few years ago, I was working for a chain tobacco and gift store. We'd often get instructions from the area and state managers about different displays that we should create. For this story, my state manager, SM, sent an email at the start of the day, letting us all know that some of the big bosses of the business would be coming by some stores tomorrow, and that all were supposed to have a certain set of displays. Fair enough. However, the closing person was not to leave until SM had received photos of the displays and called back to give the okay. The store is due to close at 6:00, so 5:00 comes. I'm the closing worker. I send SM the pictures, both by text and by email, since I know that occasionally my phone didn't properly send MMSs. 5:30 comes by, no response. It's fine, she's got about 20 stores to call. 6:00, no problem. I close the doors and start sweeping and mopping the floors. 6:30, by now I would normally leave, but I haven't heard from SM yet. I check the store emails to see if she's said anything there, but no, so I decide to call her myself, both from my phone and the store phone, but no answer. It's now 7:00, I'm just chilling in the store, lights off, with my music playing on the speakers. I send SM another text, but still get no reply. A tiny bit of context here, I don't drive, my home is about a 30-minute drive away, so by public transport it'll take me around 1.5 hours. I kinda like that travel time, it allows me to just sit back and relax after a shift. It ticks around to 8:30, 2.5 hours after the store closed, and I decide that I'm done waiting. I sign out for 8:30, send SM one last message so she knows exactly why I finished so late, and leave. I don't get any response, but my shift was bumped to a 9:00 finish without my input. She never mentioned it to me, but she never made that request again. The next story is titled, Tell Me to Do My Job. I will do exactly that, in your words exactly. I work as a porter, janitor, at my local grocery store. I have a list of items I need to accomplish 3 times a day, and I can do the morning from 6 to 12, afternoon 12 to 5, and evening till closing. The lists don't take nearly that long, approx. 2 hours, and I have been vocal about wanting more work so I don't waste company hours. As it stands, during an 8-hour shift I don't work for around 4 to 5 of the hours. I spoke to my boss today and asked him what I should do until I start the evening cleaning. Her words exactly were, just clean, and that's what I did. I sat in the break room on my phone and kept on cleaning the same table for 2 hours before my manager came up and saw me hard at work. He said, Silver, what are you doing? And I told him, you told me to clean, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I had to wait until 5 o'clock to start the evening list, and he was not pleased with the result. However, as it stands now, I will be able to ask other workers if there is anything I can do to help. The next story is titled, Focus on Doing Just What You're Paid to Do. A good few years back, during college, I had an evening job doing data entry with a friend for a large local company. It wasn't particularly complicated, but we had stacks of handwritten notes by agents who were in a rush, often with quite aggressive clients, and weren't always the most intelligent people, so the notes were often quite difficult to decipher. We had to decipher them, shorten them into summaries with acronyms, i.e. their 2 or 3 paragraph rant would often be shortened into one line, and enter this into a strange old terminal, like DOS, old school Unix application, and choose the next action. I was on minimum wage and would work 4 days a week from 5 p.m. until 9 p.m. There were dozens of full-time staff doing the same during the day, but they were behind. Our targets were $25 an hour, so $100 a night. I was working with my friend and we had this grumpy girl as our manager. I think she had to do overtime to supervise us, and didn't like it. Once I apparently cracked a couple too many jokes to my friend and she complained to the guy who had hired me. If he had said to be a little more professional, fine, but he didn't. He said, "Stop talking because you need to focus on hitting targets." I said, "I am hitting targets, I don't care, focus on doing just what you're paid to do." Fine, I did. Because of how fast I could type at this point, and an uncanny ability to decipher written nonsense quickly, I'd been hitting a minimum of 50 an hour before this chat, sometimes even up to 75 if the stacks were repetitive. After that moment, I hit 100 a night without fail. Occasionally slightly over if a stack was nearly finished, e.g. maybe 105. I did this for a week, until the boss said I can do more and he raised my targets to 30 per hours. Which was still a lot lower than I was doing before, but was the maximum any of his full-time staff were targeted, so he couldn't go higher. I hit that for another few days, and luckily he saw the funny side and offered me full-time work whenever I could do it months over the summer and Christmas, to help with their backlogs, which I gratefully accepted and stopped playing work to rule. The next story is titled, What's a Train Pass? Went to a foreign country for a month on business, and bought a $50 train pass, since it's faster and cheaper than a taxi. Got contacted by accounting, and it turns out that their system has no way of accounting for a monthly train pass, and I was told I had to take a taxi instead. My coworker complied, and ended up billing $1,000 in taxi fares. I couldn't get myself to do that, so I just took the train with my own $50 train pass, and was the first to show up everywhere. The next story is titled, Illustrate the Plot of the Story. In high school we were forced to take a test that was in no way going to affect us, colleges didn't see it, or grades weren't affected by it or anything, so being high school seniors no one took it seriously. One question required you to read a story about a boat voyage, and we were promoted to illustrate the plot, by which they meant to sum it up. However, a friend of mine drew a very detailed picture encompassing many points of the story, literally illustrating the plot. The next story is titled, You Should Not Belittle People Trying to Help You. Disclaimer, I am a certified electrician as I took several courses during school. Still, I didn't end up working with electricity, and it's been a long time since I did any work, but this pandemic is making it hard to get a guy come and make quick fixes. This is in Mexico and the heat is making life miserable for some of us. That's why my ex-wife bought a new air conditioner and asked me to move her old unit to another bedroom to replace an even older unit. No big deal, so I comply, and when I see the outlet I inform her that the voltage is different, 220 volts, and that her unit is 110 volts. She then starts literally screaming that she knows her house better than I do, and if I am not capable of doing things I should not volunteer to do them. A couple days pass since I refused to replace the outlet with a regular one. The 220 volts is a different shape, so she keeps pestering me because I don't know crap about electrical work, and I am a bad person because I don't care about my family suffering from the heat. I know my daughter's bedroom has a split unit and the little one sleeps with her sister. The bedroom I made the switch to is occupied by his brother, and he was out of the city until yesterday, so I told her the risks and that it would duck up the unit. She insisted and kept saying that I knew crap about anything, so I replaced the outlet and let her plug the unit into it. I wish I had recorded her face when the AC worked for about 10 seconds and then stopped. I gladly checked the outlet to let her see that it was perfectly connected. She then plugged in a fan to prove it wasn't connected. I wish I could broadcast the mental image of her face when the fan sparked and started smoking before she hurried to plug it off. Yesterday an AC technician was brought to check the unit and diagnosed it as dead, then she was still arguing that the outlet had 110 volts. The technician then plugs his multimeter and in the most smug tone available declares, "No ma'am, this is a 220 volts outlet." It feels so good. The brother bought a second-hand split unit, paid to get it installed, filled with gas and serviced, also scolded her for taking out of her ass. He also tried to pay me for my work but I refused. This feels so good that I feel paid in full. The next story is titled, More Per Diem Adventures. Back in the dawn of time I worked for a Cadillac dealership. Back then, General Motors was pushing hard for complete certification. If they had a class on something, everyone would eventually have to attend it. Didn't matter if you actually needed this training. You were going, regardless. I don't eat breakfast or lunch. But dinner is a feast. So my receipts would show steak and lobster for day 1, a Brazilian steakhouse on day 2, etc. The controller was a guy called Alan. He called me into his office after the last week-long class and informed me that the boss was not sending me to school to eat steak and lobster. I informed him that I had broken no rules. He may not like it, but I bet that the boss had no heartache with it. Alan wanted to teach me a lesson. He told me to follow him. We walked down to the owner's office and entered after a minute. Alan went first, and explained that I was taking advantage of a loophole in the per diem rules, and that it had to stop. The boss and I got along well, fortunately. He looked at me with a twinkle in his eye and asked what I had to say about all this. I told him that I would never abuse the trust they placed in me. I could prove that my meals were not excessive. Boss, I know that Alan just came back from a dealer conference last month. Let's pull out his receipts and see what the company spent to keep him fed. Reddit, I wish you could had seen his face. He went from indignant to thoughtful to very uncomfortable looking in about 3 seconds flat. He told me that this meeting was about GM schooling, not conferences. That I was trying to deflect the conversation. I promised that I'd eat and drink only what he did, so that there'd be no charge of favoritism. The whole time this was going on I could see that the boss had a big smile on his face. He told me I could go back to work, and that the matter was closed. But Alan should stay, because they needed to clear up a few things. I told the rest of the shop what had happened, and from then on every single penny of per diem was spent and accounted for. In the past the guys would turn in the receipts and any unspent funds, because that was how it had always been done. Not anymore. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.